And here we go, chapter 13 of Core Justice. Camp Spartan, Arrington, Tennessee. And as you'll remember, right before this, Brian looked down at the card that was given to him from Cal. Core Justice. 1. We will protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. 2. We will protect the weak and punish the wicked. 3. When the laws of this nation hinder the completion of these duties, our moral compass will guide us to see the mission through. Brian looked up at Cal. This looks like you can do whatever you want as long as you think it's right. I know that's how it seems, but you have to remember that my dad's moral compass wouldn't allow us to conduct acts of undue aggression. Besides, only the top management within SSI can greenlight those kinds of jobs. Dad handpicked that leadership. Does this come up a lot? Brian asked. Cal shrugged. I don't think so. Keep in mind that most of the work SSI does is consulting and training. Yes, we do have security teams and quick reaction forces, but most of the missions they undertake are cut and dry. There's typically a clear bad guy, and that's who we're sent in to take care of. It sounds more like the gigs you take take on are government sanctioned. Cal shrugged. Keep in mind that I don't know everything. I don't work here, but you're right, the federal government is our biggest customer, but we have a lot of divisions that trump even that big account. Brian scratched his chin. Like what? We do a lot of R&D work and either sell the final product or retain the rights. There's a lot of money in that kind of stuff. I'll bet. Are you going to run the company? Nope. Trav is better at it than I would be. I'll probably be involved somehow, but he's a much better schmoozer than I am. Plus, I've still got things I've got to take care of. Cal gazed out the expansive windows, trying to stop the intrusion of memory. So, said Brian, tell me how the hell you went into the Marine Corps instead of working here. Cal maintained his gaze for a moment, then turned to Brian. I started my first year of college at the University of Virginia in 1998. My parents were excited about the high caliber of the university, but they still wanted me close. By that time, the company was doing a lot more work with the feds. Dad had anticipated the rise of terrorism and built the company to combat those threats with the ability to augment the American military. He was even doing some work for our allies like the UK and Germany. He paused and shifted his weight, trying to find the right words. Like I said, my parents were really happy about me going to UVA, but still wanted to see me. I wanted the same thing. We'd been through a lot together. The great thing about money is that there's not much you can't do when you have it. At that point, SSI was probably a tenth of what it is now, but Mom and Dad had more money than they could ever spend. Well, on their trips to Charlottesville to watch a UVA football game and visit me, Dad went house shopping. I thought he was just looking for a condo or something they could stay in the weekend. They could stay in for weekend trips in. Whew, tongue twister. Dad didn't come from much money, but always loved the idea of owning land. He always told me that land was the one thing you could never reproduce or take away from a man. In Albemarle County, Virginia, there's a lot of land. You know Monticello, right? Yeah, Brian said. That was Thomas Jefferson, right? Yep. Founded UVA, too. Anyways, there are lots of estates like that out there. So Dad goes out and finds a spread, a lot like the one here, around 2,000 acres. He called it his little getaway. What he ended up doing was turning that into our second headquarters. He called it Camp Cavalier because I was at UVA and that's their mascot. It turned out great because he built an almost identical campus there that we have, because he built an almost identical campus there that we have here in Nashville. That gave SSI the ability to be really close to Washington, D.C. I'll bet your parents spent more time there too. Yeah, Cal said. It was great to have them close by, and they understood that I needed my space too. They'd come over for football games and sometimes take me out to dinner. That was a great 3 years. Cal paused and returned his gaze to the window and continued. In the fall of 2001, I was starting my last year in school. My parents had just been by to visit, then headed to D.C. to visit new clients and old friends. They were going to jump on a plane out to Los Angeles for a quick vacation, then head down to Camp Pendleton to see some old friends, to see some more friends, and fit a little work in too. My parents boarded American Airlines Flight 77 the morning of September 11th. They tried to call me from the flight when it became clear to my dad that the flight was hijacked. I was in class and didn't get the call. Both calmly told me that they loved me in hushed voices, and my dad told me they'd always be with me. Tears were now streaming down Cal's face, but he continued. I could hear my mom try to choke back her gasps. My dad was all business, but he still sounded scared. More than anything, I think he was worried for my mom and for me. That's the way he always was. He finished the message by telling me how proud he was and that I'd been his greatest accomplishment on earth. Cal stopped again, his breath now coming in short gasps. I never got to say goodbye. Those fucking terrorist thugs took the most important people out of my life. I sat there playing that message over and over again as I sat with my classmates watching the attacks on TV. I was just numb. Before I knew it, a couple guys from our Charlottesville headquarters barged into the room and found me. Apparently, Travis had sent them to come get me and secure me somewhere. He reached down and grabbed the bottom of his t-shirt and wiped his eyes. Then, anger iced his veins. They tried to take me out of there, but I shook them off. One of the guys tried to get me on the phone, but I wouldn't do it. I ran out of there and went straight to the ROTC building at Maury Hall. I wasn't part of ROTC, but I knew some of the guys. The MOI, which is Marine Officer Instructor, was a Mustang and had served with Dad. I found him and asked him how I could get into the Corps. He was sympathetic, but said it wasn't that easy. There were a lot more hurdles going the officer route. Before he could finish, I bolted. I knew where the Marine recruiter's office was and ran all the way there. There were a bunch of other kids there apparently doing the same thing as me. I pushed my way to the front. No one wanted to mess with the sweat-soaked kid with tears running down his face. The gunny sitting at the desk glanced up, annoyed that I'd broken his routine. I asked him how I could get to go overseas the fastest. I told him I wanted to kill the people that had killed my parents. His face changed and he softened up. He stood up and took me to the back of the room where we could talk in private. The gunny told me that he was getting flooded with similar requests and that he only had one slot left to ship kids to boot camp later that week. Cal took a deep breath. I asked him how I could get that one spot. He told me I'd have to compete for it and volunteer to be a grunt. That's an infantry Marine for all you non-grunts. Well, being a smart college kid, I aced the enlistment screening exam and maxed out the physical fitness test that day. I got the slot and left for boot camp 2 days later. Cal looked back at Brian and continued, I know you're thinking that by the time I got on that bus, I regretted my decision. Nope, it was the opposite. Every moment I grieved for my parents, I also felt like I was doing something. Hell, even if I wound up cleaning latrines, at least I would have been serving. Enlisting in the Marines was the best thing I could have done. The rest is history. Brian let the word sink in for a minute. Holy shit, Cal, he said. His voice softened. I'm really sorry about your parents. I had no idea. Yeah, well, it's not something I advertise. Look, Doc, I don't regret what I did, and I definitely don't regret what I did to those gangbangers. If you're not cool with that, maybe you should leave. Brian's face became indignant. Who do you think I am? I'm not some pussy that gets sick over a little bit of blood. I don't give a shit that you killed those guys. They deserved it. I wish you'd finished off the other two. He stopped and took a deep calming breath. Look, I'm here to help, okay? You've gone through some really shitty situations. I'm more concerned about you mentally than some dead criminal. I'm fine, Cal said. I know how to take care of myself. Yeah, right. I know you didn't learn that in the Corps. We're brothers, remember? You've got to be straight with me, man. Cal snapped his glare back at Brian. You want to tell me, you want me to tell you that my body aches all day because Jess is dead? You want me to tell you that half the day I wish I'd died with her? You want me to tell you that I want to kill those motherfuckers over and over again? Yes, as a matter of cold fact. You can't keep that shit inside, man, Brian said. You've got to let it out or it'll eat you alive. You've seen some of those boys that come back from the desert and just clam up. Most turn into drunks or druggies. I don't want that to happen to you. Cal stared at Brian. The guy was panting from exertion. Then it happened. It was like a door had been opened. He sure as hell didn't open it himself. In walked Jess. She looked as she had always looked to him, beautiful with her 1,000-year-old soul staring out through her eyes. And she did all the little things, like stick her tongue out at him when they met eyes across some crowded room, or purse her lips when she was deep in thought, not realizing he was watching. A wordless gesture here and there, her small yet firm hands stirring milk into tea, the clinking of the spoon in the cup, the rolling of her eyes when he made a dumb joke, her laugh, her tears, her smile, her smile. He laid back and threw his hands to his face and sobbed uncontrollably. The bottled up pain surfaced in full force. He felt Brian's comforting hand on his shoulder. Maybe it was like this for 5-10 minutes. Maybe it was half the night. He fell away into deep, dreamless sleep. Brian expertly checked his friend, making sure Cal was okay. It was time for the Marine to get some well-deserved rest. He stood up and walked across the room, sat down in a leather recliner, and began his vigil. Well, I think that chapter is pretty self-explanatory. You know, Brian and Cal, Doc and Cal becoming friends, and Cal finally letting it out. And it's interesting, even back then, you know, we were talking about Marines or soldiers coming back from war and keeping it all in, and we're still seeing that problem. I don't have the answer to it, although we talk about it, which is good, and I think it needs to be talked about more. I don't know, but we'll see. So stay tuned we got part 2 coming up.